So welcome everybody. I'm Michelle Canfield. I live out in Washington State, just north of Seattle, and I've been in NSIP for about 10 years now. In my day job, I am a program manager and a software engineer, and so I'm kind of a Excel power user. And Dan asked me to just kind of present some thoughts on how to use Excel, or you could also use Google Sheets. It doesn't have to be Excel, but any sort of spreadsheet tool to analyze your EBV data when it's coming back. And I should probably even be clear about the term data, because it sounds like even that has been carefully used. That I think in the context of NSIP, sometimes when we say data, we mean the raw data that we send to LambPlan that's, got our weights and all that data. And that data, to be clear, is proprietary and not publicly shared. But I'm going to loosely use the term data to mean also my estimated breeding values, or genomics estimated breeding values, coming back, because it's kind of all numbers in a spreadsheet. So sorry if I misuse that term at all, but when I say data, I mean the more generic sense of what's coming back to you from LambPlan. And that data that comes back is actually public, or it's all searchable on the NSIP website. So with that, let's dive in. I'm going to reshare my screen to kind of show you my whole screen, because I'm going to be flipping back and forth a little bit. So the first question that was asked is kind of what are GEBVs or EBVs? So in NSIP, if you're not already enrolled, let's see, I'll do my best crack at in a nutshell. We all collect data on economically important traits. So for catodins, that's mostly going to be growth and prolificacy data. So most of us collect birth weight, weaning weight, and kind of an early post-weaning weight at 120 days. And then we submit that data along with kind of pedigree data of who the sire and dam was, and the birth date and the birth type. So whether it was a single, twin, or triplet, and then what ended up getting weaned. So whether that you lost lambs or whether she raised all 3 triplets or not. And we wrap up all that data and submit it in a data file, and it actually goes to Australia to LambPlan. That's who the US has contracted with to do these calculations for us. And they do a big number crunching in a mainframe that I understand takes several days, lots of math, that does a bunch of analysis and averaging over all of the pedigree data. And what we get back from them are estimated breeding values, which are basically predictors of the genetic potential of any particular animal on those very things that we're measuring. And if you have wool breeds, there are other traits that you can measure, like fiber diameter and fleece weight and stuff. But I'm going to be focusing on catodin data today. So this applies to anybody, or you can use the information regardless of what breed of sheep you have. But the data you'll be looking at today is the catodin specific data. So hopefully that kind of summarizes that in a nutshell. And I think you're going to see as we go on, because I'll be showing how, how my data looks when I come back and how I look at it in Excel. So you'll get a pretty good picture of kind of what we do with the data once we get it back from NSIP. So for starters, I wanted to just kind of show what you get back from NSIP when they just email you a file. So this is one presentation of it, is they give you this PDF report. And so as you guys know, that if you're in NSIPs, the top kind of gives you your sires that you used in the last year, and then a summary of all of your dams or your adult ewes. And then as you scroll down, it gets down into the male progeny. So these are all the rams that were born in your lamb crop this year, and then all the ewe lambs. And this is kind of one presentation of data, right? That you've got all your estimated breeding values in here, and the sire and dam is off there to the right, and the index. And I'm going to talk about the hair sheep index more in a minute. But the challenge with this presentation is, as you can see, my file is 15 pages long. So it's kind of a lot of data in this format where, you're kind of scrolling around, and it's really hard to compare one animal against another, or sort the data to where, like, if I want to see, well, show me my top indexers down all the way to my lowest indexers, or the ones that have the best growth down to the least growth. That instead, the data is kind of all sprinkled throughout here. So unless you have a really small flock, like maybe under a dozen ewes, where you're only comparing a couple dozen lambs, once you get into a larger flock size, this gets to be pretty unwieldy to try to do any analysis of this data in here, to either figure out, well, what replacement ewes do I want to keep out of the crop that was born this year? Or what do I want to do with my adult ewes? Which ones are kind of my top performers that I really should focus my breeding plans on to produce replacement ewes? Which ones are kind of my bottom performers that it's time to move them out this year and replace them with the next crop? So at least I find this file to be a little bit hard to use, or it's a little bit unwieldy. So what I found is that using Excel or a spreadsheet actually makes it much easier. So first off, I'm going to show you how to get that spreadsheet data out of Pedigree Master. So you guys, if you're in NSIP, you're familiar with this little look. So this is the main screen if you go into reports on utilities. And I should mention, by the way, I'm recording this, and don't feel like you have to take really detailed notes. If you miss something, and just feel free to shoot me an email or a text later if you're wondering, you know, hey, how did you get that file, or how did you do that thing in Excel? I'm always happy to help answer questions later. So don't panic if you miss some detail, but I'll try to walk through kind of the how-to in here. So in this main reporting and general utilities tab, you go to the data files tab, and then in this right-hand side where it says copy append data, sometimes the naming conventions are a little funny in here, but under EBVs database, if you click copy, which really kind of means download, it will pop up this window. And I usually just leave this to default. I let it download everything because, as you'll see, I'm going to filter all this out. And so any extraneous data in there that I don't care about, I'm not going to see anyways. So you click copy, and what that's going to do is actually save a little file, and it tells you where it's saving it. If you have installed your pedigree master in the generic path, it will be here. So it's on your C drive under sheep genetics pedigree master, and then there's a little folder in there called export, and this file that it's dumping out is called exp_ebv.dbf. And .dbf stands for database file, but it's really just really kind of a glorified text file that Excel can read really easily. So that's where it puts it. So when you click OK, conveniently they put this other little link in here that says open export copy folder. So if you forget where I put it, you can just click that and it will actually open up that folder. And here's the file, and you can kind of, you know, sanity check the date and time that, yep, indeed, I just did download this on November 1st at 4:07 Pacific time. So there's the file as it comes out of Pedigree Master. So now what you're going to want to do is pull it into Excel. And so right now I just have Excel open blank. You can either navigate from the open menu and navigate to it, but you can also just click and drag and it should populate. So here it is in all of its glory. And you can see my particular file, has, let me go down to the bottom, has almost 1,300 rows in it. So obviously I don't have 1,300 animals here. And so part of this is that it's giving me some data that are like animals related to my animals, or animals that were here in the past that I've probably been lazy about updating their status in Pedigree Master. And so obviously it's giving me way more animals that I'm interested in, but you'll see in a minute why I don't care about that. Or like I said, I'll be able to filter all this out and only look at the animals that are of interest to me. But if we just scroll through this, you can see there is a whole lot of data in here. So even this doesn't help us much as far as this is still an overwhelming amount of data. And if I just, I'm gonna go freeze pane so that we can see the top row and then kind of scroll down to the middle. And if you scroll to the right, you can see how many columns of data are in this file. And some of them are empty because, you know, some of them might be like wool traits that don't apply to Katahdins. But there's all this data, including all of these kind of mysteriously named index values all the way to the right. And so it's got columns, you know, all the way out to what column IT or something. So this is a huge data file that still is not very easy to work with. And when I first started, I would go in and kind of like hand edit this and hide columns that I didn't want to see. But I realized like that's really a pain because sometimes you're getting this file back every 2 weeks, especially during lambing season when you're doing a lot of data submissions. So you want a more automated way to parse out just the data that you want out of this file. So I will show you how I've done that. So I have this file that I have bookmarked, and you can see it's right here at the top because I look at and live in this spreadsheet almost every day. And this is where I do almost all of my management decisions. It takes a little while to load. So this is my actual estimated breeding values spreadsheet. I'm going to unfilter a couple of things. So you're looking at my real stuff in all of its glory. And so I've got a bunch of stuff in the spreadsheet, and I'm going to show you more of what I keep in here, but I'm going to start with just the EBVs and how I get them over here. So they are here, and these are the EBVs that we tend to be looking at the most in Katahdin. So birth weight, weaning weight, post-weaning weight, scrotal circumference, number of lambs born, number of lambs weaned, maternal birth weight, maternal weaning weight. And then I do look at this maternal $ index, which is an index that Lamb Plan uses. I find it kind of useful just as an alternate perspective on grass, but the USA Hair Index is the main index we use. And right now we can't use it because when they flip the switch on the genomics EBVs on October 1st, that index algorithm needs to be updated, and that part isn't done yet. So everywhere else you can't see these values yet, like in this PDF file. Oh, sorry, this must be in, oh, I think it was a mistake. I think the October 1 one, they still left it in there, but they've fixed it since then. So this will be blank in subsequent PDF reports. And when you look on the searchable database on the web, you won't see them, but they are still sneaking through in the data export. So they're here. Just know that you can't use them reliably until they update the algorithm, which I think is promised next spring or sometime. But it's good that they're in here for now, because I'll at least talk about how we can use it once the numbers are accurate again, because it's a really useful thing. So here they are, and how I get them into this spreadsheet from that other spreadsheet is I actually have a little tab with that same name of that file that was exported, and it's just kind of hidden under here. I never really use it. And every time I get a new data run, I basically just copy and paste out of that other file. So I come here and highlight on the upper left, which highlights the whole dang spreadsheet, and then, just do Control C for copy, or, right click, and then come over here and paste it in. And then I never look at that tab again. And then in here, I use this cool little trick that Excel has called VLOOKUP. And what VLOOKUP does, it's a little macro, and basically you can tell it, I want you to look for a certain string in another tab and then retrieve some data related to that string and put it back here in this cell. So you can see for this first row I have here, I am asking VLOOKUP. And I'll send you, if for those of you who want to try this, I have a little blank spreadsheet that has this set up that will help you kind of get this going. If you've never used this before, it's not too hard. And once you get it set up, it works great. But the idea is it's telling VLOOKUP, I want you to look for this string value that's in column A2, and I want you to look for it in this other tab called exp_EBV, and I want you to look through columns A through FL, so basically the whole spreadsheet. And then when you find a row that has that string in it, I want you to return the value that's in column 7. And that is actually correlated to the birth weight data. So what it's going to do is go find that number and plug it in here. And then I do that the same for all of the traits that I'm looking for. So basically every time I upload that underlying tab, this main tab is updating with all the data I want. So I don't have to look at all that gobbledygook and extra data. It's always just magically all here. And somebody asked me once, isn't there risk that they would change the ordering of the columns and like add one in the middle and it would offset all your numbers? And I think maybe there's remote risk of that, but as far as I could tell, and I've been doing this for maybe 8 years, doing it this way, they've never messed with that. So I think even when they add new data columns, they always do it to the far right so that they don't disturb the numbering, because I have a hunch that they also hard code the column use in their own use at LandPlan. So I'm pretty sure they would never disturb that. There's no guarantees, so it's good to always maybe spot check some numbers now and then to make sure you're still retrieving the right column, but usually you'd notice if you weren't. So maybe I'll pause there. Does that kind of make sense for how you get that data out of Pedigree Master and into your spreadsheet so that now you have something you can look at and work with?
I have a question.
Yeah.
On your EBVs tab, where did you get columns A through what, W?
All of these guys?
Where?
Yeah. Great question. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about all the middle stuff, but this first column, just the NSIP IDs themselves, what I do is this is kind of my single source of truth of me maintaining the sheep that I know are still here on the farm. So they're not sold, dead, butchered, otherwise dispositioned. And so I manually maintain this list and I keep it in sync. I'll just flip over really quick. I use Ranch Manager for kind of my husbandry tracking. This is similar to, I think Flockfiler is another popular one. And then some people use the, I'm forgetting the name of the one that's associated with the RFID. Dan, help me. Shearwell, right? They have their own database. So any one of those works. And I like Ranch Manager just because it's really good for tracking, like when you give medications or tracking locations of sheep in different fields and then tracking breeding and births. But I don't like it so much for doing data analysis. And I had actually talked to the original maker of Ranch Manager once, and I can't remember what I was asking him, something about, can't you add some data analysis? And he said, Michelle, I don't really want to reproduce the spreadsheet tool because Excel does spreadsheet so well. Like, it would take me 1,000,000 years to recreate that in Ranch Manager. And he goes, instead, I just give you the ability to export into Excel so you can do all of your data analysis over there and not really expect my tool to do it. And I thought that was a really smart observation of his. So indeed, Ranch Manager does have this. It's under the print menu, but you can print to Excel and dump out your data there. So I do that sometimes if I'm wanting data out of Ranch Manager that's more of like my management data of locations or lists of lambs or whatever. But For the most part, I'm living in the spreadsheet for my day-to-day kind of what am I doing with my sheep, which ones am I keeping, selling, butchering, all that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more later about some of these other columns and all the other things I do to track in here, but I'm going to start a little bit with the EBVs. So as you can see, I've got some color coding in here, and then on the top row, oh yeah, go ahead.
So on your lookup, it says A through FL. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
And now it says 7. That what you just brought over was just those first 7 filled out columns from the pedigree master page.
Not quite. So it's telling VLOOKUP, look for this string, this NSIP ID, and then in this whole span of, in that other tab, columns A through FL, and then once it finds it, it's saying, bring me back the number that's in column 7. So if we go in here, we can, and this is the annoying part, is that you have to actually kind of map this, right? Because in Excel, the columns are labeled with alphabet numbers, but now you need to convert it to a number. And there's actually tools on the web that will do this for you too, because if you're way out to, you know, column ZL or something, it's a pain to count. But for this one, it's easy. So we can see column A is 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So birth weight is in column 7. Does that make sense? And then weaning weight is in column 9, 2 more columns over. And so if you look at my V lookup for weaning weight, I'm saying, bring me back the number that's in column 9 that matches this animal. So it's just intersecting the row and column to say, I found an animal, a row with this in it, and now I'm going to go look in column 7 and grab you that number and stick it here.
And it will stick it on right next to it in column 9. And you have to do that for each column you're looking for?
Yeah, just once. And all you have to do is set it up for the first row. And then once you do that, you can click and drag, and it will just propagate it down through your whole spreadsheet. And then once you've set that up, it will just always update it. So every time I copy and paste a new set of data in this underlying tab, it just pulls all those numbers in automatically into here. So you don't have to touch it again once you get it set up.
Okay, got it.
And I've got, remind me later, or feel free to shoot me an email. You've got my email address since I sent you the Outlook invite, and I'll send you just a sample template of how to do it that you can copy.
Great, thank you.
Makes sense. Okay, so once we're in here, you can see I've got all these nice little drop-down arrows on the top, and how you get to those is under the data tab. If you just click the filter button, it will turn those on and off, and it will just basically turn them on for everything you've got data in. And what those allow you to do is sort either largest to smallest or smartest to largest, and then you can also sort by color, and then you can do some filtering with numbers or color as well. So there's lots of ways you can kind of slice and dice your data with those little drop-downs. So let's just look at post-weaning weight. I'm going to sort largest to smallest, and you can see I have this cool color coding where the top ones are color coded in green, and then as I scroll down, the bottom ones are color coded in blue. And how I do that is when it, how I do that is when I highlight the column and go on the main home tab, there's this cool conditional formatting that Excel does, and there's all different things you can ask it to do to kind of apply a rule and then apply some formatting to cells. But the one I'm using here is like the top 10%, or you can also do it under more rules. But if you click on this and say, I want to, and I'm going to change this to say, I want to highlight the top 25%, and then I want to do it in this custom format. And I would pop up in this window and say, I want you to color code them all green. And then it will do that. And so I color code the top quartile, or the top 25%, in green, and then the bottom quartile in blue. And what that allows me to do is just start to kind of visually scan to see those anomalies where I've got a top animal here. Let's see, let's sort on the hair index, just because sometimes you can really spot them in there. Here's a good example of a ewe that is a really high indexer. So she's got a good hair index, and like her maternal weaning weight is really good. Her number of lambs weaned is really good, but she's pretty weak in number of lambs born. And she's in my bottom quartile for growth, for weaning weight and post weaning weight. So those are, once you start getting a lot of aggregate data, it's really hard to compare, one ewe at a time. Like you're starting to kind of look in this aggregate of like, just give me my top performers and then any anomalous ones within that, so I can decide what to do with them. So obviously these ones where they're like green all across the board, those are my best ewes, right? That they're just tops in every category. Oops, I've got some missing data in here for some reason. I think I might have messed something up. Oh, I know why. It's because that's a purchase animal. And so, those will be kind of my no-brainers. Of course, those ewes are going to stay here. Probably I'm going to be keeping a lot of their daughters, but I'm starting to look for these things of like, well, maybe this ewe, maybe she gets to stay, but maybe at some point I'm going to drop her because she's just so low in growth and not really that great a number of lambs born, that eventually I may move her on out. And then, conversely on the bottom, that I'm really looking for, show me my ewes that are just really bottoms everywhere. And I've definitely got some low numbers since the genomic run. The data has moved around quite a bit. And so I was feeling pretty good that I had all kind of above 0 numbers. And then now obviously I've got some dogs that are, pretty low here. So I'll probably be looking at moving those animals out soon. But this helps you kind of just, focus on who are my top performers that I'm really going to focus my breeding efforts on, and then who are my bottom performers that I really need to be honest with myself about. Those ewes probably need to go, that they've got a lot of data behind them at this point that's telling me they're not helping me any. And to some extent, I sell a lot of, butcher animals. So if those ewes are twinning and their lambs are reasonably healthy, I might still keep them around. They're just producing butcher lambs. But at some point, I want to keep moving my bell curve by pruning out those bottom animals and replacing them with ewe lambs that are up here in the top. So I'll maybe pause there. So is that helpful for just kind of understanding how to sort on your EBVs in the spreadsheet to start making decisions about ewes and replacement ewes?
Michelle, this is Tom. Did you calculate the quartiles separately, or in your conditional formatting, that was a function of that directly?
I just let Excel do it. And I'm assuming it is doing math based on average or mean, not median, but I've never looked that up to see how it's figuring that, but it does, if you sort, it does seem to generally get the top 20, say there's 100 animals in here, it would highlight the top 25 in green and the bottom 25 in blue. So I'm just letting Excel do its, averaging math on the data in that column, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I that's essentially quartiles. Yeah, I got you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't know if you were actually doing something on the side with the quartile function in Excel.
No, I'm just letting it do it, the top 25, yep. Bottom 25, because I'm just kind of looking for that bracketing, right? And then all the animals that are in the middle are just, animals that are kind of hanging out at your place, probably producing butcher lambs. And then, every now and then you get an anomalous one where some ewe in the middle throws a really good lamb that's, we call that a nick, right? When it's a lamb that's better than both of its parents, it's going to skyrocket it up. And then maybe you want to keep that one. But yeah, you're mostly focusing on those top animals and then figuring out how to get rid of those bottom animals over time.
And now that you've built this whole thing, it seems like all you actually have to do is just use a new, generate and incorporate a new exp.ebv file. And then this thing knows to look there every time.
Yeah, I just copy and paste
so
all that.
You don't have to rebuild this or do anything with this again. It's just the, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so I just copy and paste that giant data set into this other tab that I never look at. Usually I have it scooted way over to the right. And then I always just work in here. And so let me talk a little bit more about other stuff I do in the spreadsheet that's just handy for kind of decision making and management and stuff. So I can see I've got a lot of columns hidden here, so I'll unhide some. So I have an extra column in here that has the color of the lambs, and it's kind of silly because I actually don't, I enjoy colorful Katahdins, but I don't really care about it and I don't pay any attention to it in my own selection, but I do pay attention to it when I'm deciding on animals I'm going to sell and how I'm going to price them, because in my market, there is huge demand for fancy colors. And so I can charge a little bit of a premium on those. And then I also know they will tend to sell better. So say I'm choosing between two rams that I'm going to market as breeding rams, and I think, oh, their EBVs are pretty similar, but one's a plain white and one's a fancy pinto. I'm probably going to choose to market that fancy pinto, and the plain white guy is probably going to go to the butcher channel because he'll be less popular. And then I do make sure that I have some white ones in there. So that's just kind of a funny little thing in my market that I do keep track of in here. And then I do put birth type in here because sometimes I'm kind of looking at that or taking that into consideration. And then I have a little column in here where I keep track of what lambs are outside of the ewe. And this is kind of only in the springtime, but sometimes as I'm thinking of certain mature ewes that I'm going to sell, I want to know, well, what lambs does she have outside? Because I may want to sell her, as a ewe with twin lambs outside or something. And so I'm kind of paying attention to what has she got? Do I want to keep one of her daughters where she's got to stay here till they're weaned, or does she have two ram lambs and I'm ready to just move her out with those guys at side. So that's what I do with those columns. And then I have this status column where I'm just keeping track of which ones I definitely want to keep, which ones I want to sell more as breeding stock, which ones need to be culled or butchered, or like you can see one here that was sold. So I'm just keeping track of where they're all going. And I can sort on that too. So some days, I just want to, like work on my advertisement. So I might just filter down to, I just want to look at the animals that are for sale and kind of think about how I want to price them. And then I mark them in green once I've actually made an ad on my website. So, all the color coding is just like helping me remember where I'm at or what I'm doing. So there's just all sorts of useful ways to help you track your stuff. Obviously, you can have a column for DNA status if you're tracking that. I had some columns helping me figure out which ones I was going to do genomic testing on. And then the other thing that I do with my butcher lambs, I'm probably a little different than some of you who are able to take like whole truckloads of lambs to a sale, is that I'm selling more kind of on a dribbling basis, direct market directly to lamb buyers and going through a custom exempt butcher. And so the butcher usually comes here every 6 weeks and comes kind of all winter and spring. And so I need to plan out those butcher dates of which animals are ready and how many. And so I'm doing frequent weights of lambs and capturing those in here. And then, Excel's really handy at just calculating average daily gain. So like I may capture weight data every 2 weeks, look at the average daily gain, and then try to project out, well, how much do I think that lamb's going to weigh 2 weeks from now or a month from now? And so I can start to group to figure out which ones are going to be ready for butcher and which ones should I bring in to be, planned for the next butcher date. So I'm using this constantly to sort of plan all my rolling butcher dates. So that part's really handy too. And then one other thing I do that maybe is a little bit unique, let me see if I can find it, is I try to maintain genetic diversity in my ewe flock. So, we all started with some ewes that we purchased from somewhere. And if all you're doing is selecting on EBVs or like on the index for say, you're gonna over time sort of skew your population towards your best ewes and sort of start to narrow your genetic pool. And I try not to do that. So I try to keep track of, I have 25 ewe lines that I started with, and I try to keep them all here. So I actually have a field where I use these little 3-letter codes to just remind me which ewe families they're from, and then I can sort on that. So that when I'm making decisions about selling, like say I sort on this family coded ADD, I know I've got this many ewes in that family. And so, I may be careful about not selling too many of them because I don't want to lose that genetic base that I had. So it's just kind of another little, fun thing you can do to sort in Excel if you're tracking things like that. So I'll maybe pause there. What questions do you have now? Get rid of some of those fields.
I have a question. This is Sasha. I work for an insurance company and I'm also a Excel VBA developer, and this is really cool. And it just seems a shame that we would have to start like from scratch. I mean, I typically automate all this stuff similar to what you're doing. Would you be able to provide a template for us? Maybe I understand you wouldn't want to be providing your own data and your own numbers, but maybe you could start with a fake number there and A2
absolutely.
and increment it down. And
I do have one that's just kind of a blank one that you can fill out. So I'm happy to send that to you. Just shoot me an email afterwards. And I'd shared it before on the NSIP list in the discussion list in the past, but yeah, happy to share that anytime. And that will help you get yours set up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Be ashamed to have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, no, and you'll see like one, it's VLOOKUP is always a little bit mind bending when you first figure out how it works. But once you get it set up, like you just never have to think about it again. So it's just, take you 20 minutes to get it going and then you can always use it. I'll point out a few other things I track in here. So there's this pedigree known column. That's another just interesting data point from NSIP that basically is telling you how many animals in this animal's pedigree does it know about. So, the 100% ones, NSIP says, I know everything about this animal's pedigree versus some of the other ones. I guess I don't have that many low ones, but here's one that was probably out of some purchase stock. So NSIP is telling me we don't know as much about that animal's pedigree, or there's some blank spots of outside animals coming in. And then I also track, for those of you who use the maternal certified and stud certified little marketing logos. I find those really useful. I do find in my area that buyers will preferentially purchase those animals if they've got that nice kind of certification label, and they're usually willing to pay more. So I find it to be a useful branding exercise. And so Excel is another way to really help you. The rules are, like for maternal certified, I can't remember what it is, but it's like, animals that are indexing from the 60th percentile over, and then animals that have a certain, I think maternal weaning weight and number of lambs weaned, I think is a 3. So you can start to filter down. So like for here, if it said the hair index had to be over, I don't know what the number was, but I'll just make something up to say it was over 108 or something, whoops, did I do that right? Yeah, greater than or equal to 108. And so then it would filter down just those animals, and I would make X's in those columns, and then I would filter on that and then go, all right, now let me look for the ones that have the maternal weaning weight that it's supposed to have. And then I delete all the X's for the ones that don't meet that criteria. So then that gives me a nice summary of which ones have that certification, so I can use that when I'm marketing. Okay, so if there's no more questions on that, I wanted to shift gears a little bit and talk about how you can use the same kind of idea when, say, you're choosing a ram from somebody else's flock. Because I think most commonly what we do is say, okay, I've decided today I want to buy a ram from Tom. Because maybe Tom lives near me, or maybe he doesn't, but for whatever reason, I've decided I want to buy from him. And so now I want to look at his data of his rams available. And so obviously, if Tom can export you a spreadsheet and then delete out all the rams that aren't available for sale, like that's the most ideal case, because then you've just got this data in here and you can do the same kind of sorting and comparison. But say that breeder's busy and they don't have time to send that to you. Instead, maybe you can at least get them to forward you this file, their individual listing file. So what I would do in that case is think, all right, well, what's kind of my criteria for ram selection? And this is actually my file, so we'll just use this as an example. So when I do a selection, I usually want to try to shoot for finding rams that are at least in the 60th percentile or above for all traits, and then ideally, much higher for the traits that are the most important to me. So how I figure that out is I would start by going to the NSIP website and the searchable database, which is under this link, Find Stock with EBVs, searchable database. You go here, see how quickly this loads. And then you click on online searchable database. And then up here in the upper left-hand menu, there's this little link called reports. It's kind of hidden up there, but this is where we find the percentile report. And obviously for Katahdins, we're going to click on Katahdins. And this is a super important table that hopefully all of us are very familiar with and using all the time. But basically this table, they don't update it all the time, but it looks like this was just updated for November. So this is a very recent run, but usually they'll update this several times a year. So it reflects sort of a recent run that came from NSIP, and this is basically a bell curve on its side, and it's a little bit squished to the right, I guess I would say. So you can see this top column, percentile 100. So these are the top animals in the nation, basically, for these scores. So we can see, let's skip birth weight for a minute, because that's actually one that you don't want to get too big. But maternal weaning weight, the top animal in the country is at 2.41. or somewhere around there. And then the animals that are in the top 1% of the country are at 1.67, the top 2%, 1.5. And you can see this goes down by 1% steps down to 95, and then it starts going down by 5% steps down to 50. And then at the bottom is just kind of in 10% steps, because obviously we don't really care about these animals in the bottom, whether he's in the 10th or 11th percentile. These are all animals that are probably going to go to the butcher channel anyways, if they're down there. So that's why it kind of explodes out at the top end, because that's really where we're wanting to see that spread is, what's happening with these animals in our kind of upper quartile, or, up above 50%. So if I'm thinking, okay, I want to buy a ram, but I really want to make sure that he's at least, above average, right? So like 60% onward. So I'm going to say, all right, that means I want his maternal weaning weight to be above 0.49. I want his weaning weight to be above 1.71. I want his post weaning weight to be above 2.90. So one way you could find these is actually just in the searchable database. So I'll open that window up. If you can search nationwide if you have the energy to track down all those breeders. But like I said, a lot of times, we're just searching. We already know we want to buy from a certain breeder. Now we just want to look at the data we have. So you could just look in here and say, I'm just looking for ram lambs that were born this year. So I'm going to say, give me all the ram lambs born after January, or maybe I'd do it like last October to catch fall lambs. But like, I know I'm not looking for an adult ram right now. I'm looking for a ram lamb. So I could say I'm searching for male, and then I'm going to skip the status field because not everybody keeps that up to date. So that's one drawback of this database, right? Is that we never know, you know, you pick out an animal and say, I really want to buy that one. And then you find out from the breeder, oh, I already butchered that one. So there's a little bit of a limitation there in that this database isn't necessarily telling us what animals are available, just what animals were born. But you can search on a particular breeder's code. So mine is 640075. And then you could fill in all those numbers here to say, I want, you know, minimum weaning weight. If you go back here, we said what, 60 percentile. So we want the weaning weight to be 0.49 or above. So maybe I'd say 0.48 to just capture that. So you could fill all those out and then say view results, and it's going to give you this big report of all of the animals that meet that criteria. So that's one way to kind of at least dig into someone's data set. And then what I would do either with this, and I'll show you in a second how to do it with the PDF file as well, is then once I got kind of a short list of rams I might be interested in, I'd probably hand copy those data over into an Excel spreadsheet, because then you can start sorting and making more notes. And then I would basically make my short list and I would prioritize them in priority order. So then I could send that breeder a list of like, hey, here's 10 rams from your crop that I'm interested in priority order 1 through 10 that I would be interested in buying. Can you tell me which ones are available and what their prices are? And how you can do that in the individual listing file is same kind of thing. So you'd scroll down to male progeny. And then what I do is I use this little highlighter tool and do kind of the same thing. So if we go back and say, we were looking again for maternal weaning weight 0.49 and above. So I just skim through here and start marking all of the ram lambs that meet that. So 0.8, 0.9, all of these guys are above. This one's not above that. So just start highlighting all those guys. And then I would do that for all the traits that I'm interested in. And then I already did this kind of fully for a file so you can see what it looks like. And I skipped the eye muscle depth and fat and then the fecal egg counts because I don't take those measurements myself in my flock. So that there's some numbers in here that are kind of tentatively inherited from animals that came into my system that came from systems that had these measurements, but it's not highly accurate in my flock. So I just ignored those for now and just focused on weight and number of lambs weaned, and then the index again for when it will be turned back on in the spring. But the idea is that can help you kind of make your short list where you can skim through to say, well, let me find rams that have yellow highlights in all the rows that I care about. And then that will help you narrow down a list of rams that you might be interested in from that particular breeder. So what questions do you have on that?
Have you ever copied out of that that PDF file? Like you can grab that whole line and then dump it into Excel and then go to the next line and dump it into Excel.
I haven't. Does that work very well? I just feel like
it doesn't work very well if there's a blank in there, but it only takes a matter of minutes to fix the blanks.
Oh, you mean like for like say in this row where it doesn't have an eye muscle depth?
Yeah, it'll truncate but so
let's try it. Let's see. How do you do that?
It's not that hard.
If I copy this whole row.
Yep.
I'm gonna do a new sheet. Oh, okay, cool. So it's just space delimited. So then do you need to do some extra work to get it to parse out all those fields?
Yeah, you just have to parse that, and then there'll be a problem. There'll be one will be out of sync because of that. That measurement wasn't there. But if you've only got 25 of them, you can easily go down through and say, there's one I need to shift those to the right.
Yeah, you can spot them manually.
Easier than retyping all that.
How are you doing the parsing? Are you doing it in here, or are you saving it first like as a text file and then importing it in as a comma separated?
It's I parse it right in Excel under data.
I think you go to
Data.
And then text to columns.
Text to columns.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's like 2 steps, I think, and that's all it takes.
Is it under here?
Oh, over kind of
on the right.
Middle right.
Oh, keep going.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
Right there, yeah.
Columns. All right, and then delimited
It's delimited, yeah, and then hit next.
by space,
Space,
right?
bingo.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we're all learning something new as we're going. Cool.
But they're not in perfect alignment.
Mm-hmm.
There was a blank, but it's like one cell, so no biggie.
Yeah, perfect. Oh, that's a good tip. I'd never tried doing that before. So that would at least save you the manual effort of once you kind of have your short list in here of animals you want to pull over into Excel, you can copy and paste those rows over and then start looking at them here. Yeah, great. I haven't used that. It's amazing how many functions are in Excel, and I feel like I'm a power user, but there's still so many things that I don't use very often. Cool. Well, I was curious to hear what other people do. Who else uses Excel to analyze their GEBVs now that we have them? Tom, are you doing much of it, or?
Yeah, I do quite a bit. I live in Excel.
Yeah, I do too. I just aren't doing the fancy stuff. So I'm definitely be sending you an email and having the base template so I can start exiting. I usually manually type all that stuff and it's
Oh yeah,
stupid because I'm beyond that and I'm just lazy.
Yeah, this will save you a lot of time for sure.
I've messed with V before, but I am by no means a pro at it. So
Yeah, it's one of those things
good to see how you've got that all built, because that's
you have to Google to remind yourself how it works, but then you're like, okay, I got it.
right. I've watched all the bunch of tutorials and
Yeah.
but I'm never convinced that I'm doing it right.
Yeah. One other thing I should mention that I try to remember to do is every time I get a new data run in, I do save an archive copy of this file just kind of under its date stamp before I bring in that new file, just so that I have that history if I ever want to look back, because, you know, EBVs are moving around all the time, right? So sometimes it's interesting to know, like, what was that Rams EBVs last summer when I used them versus, you know, where they're at now. As well as every now and then I mess up my data. And so it's good to be able to go back and figure out what I did. So it's always a good tip to save some backups now and then.
I got a question for Tom.
Yeah. Fire away.
Tom, when you do that copy out of the PDF, what happens with the percentage numbers?
The accuracy? You mean the accuracies?
Yeah, like the little accuracy percentage number.
They're actually that's one drop to that is they're actually in another row. And if you do that,
it just drops it down.
If you do that, no, it adds it on the end. So it like scrambles everything. I don't with that, honestly. If I'm doing this sort of a thing here. I have in the past, and it's a heck of a lot of very little extra information. So yeah, because if you selected, Michelle has right there, KMC 065, if you selected from the 16-digit number all the way to ID, it would you get this massively long string. And
so if you highlighted like both rows,
pretty sure
but then it'll
I don't think it'll put it in two rows. I think it'll put it all in one.
Oh yeah, let's see.
Didn't seem to get it.
Didn't even get it. Huh.
No.
Huh.
Your copy didn't work. You just copied the same thing.
Did I? Okay, here, let me try again. Oh, I think it's because I have the highlighter tool going. It's getting confused. There we go. Okay, yeah, so the accuracies ended up down here. So I don't know. I mean, I guess that wouldn't be too bad. You would know they're kind of down here offset, but
I mean, personally, I want them to the right so I can sort vertically, right? I can sort, and then I color code hot to cold. So I want the accuracies to the right of that. That's my preference.
yeah.
So it's clunky, but anyway, if you want to see them, this is the way to do it. Have a lot of options afterwards is all.
Yeah, so it looks like you'd have to do some manual tinkering to get those in if you wanted to look at them, or just kind of have your two files next to each other, look back and forth.
If you want to dream about those next 25 RAM lambs, you know, just copying that out of the PDF is and pretty much anybody will send you their individual listing. I mean, if they don't, then I don't know why, but
Yeah, then you'd be back to searching in the online database instead. Yeah, and this one, it doesn't give you the accuracies, I guess, in the summary either, does it? And I sure wish this would this doesn't dump out into Excel, right? It only goes to PDF.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so. It would sure be awesome if this would export into Excel so that if you did a, you know, narrowed down a search in the searchable database, you could get it into a spreadsheet. Future functionality we can request.
We have a meeting next week, Tom. Maybe we can ask.
It would probably be really easy for them to add. Just like a CSV file that it would export to.
Can I ask another question though about your sorting on the quartiles? If you could go back to that previous screen there.
Yeah, where you want to go here?
The pull downs on. Yeah, so you were able to sort on, say, weaning weight, or you know, small on weaning weight or post, whatever, doesn't matter, and it doesn't. It keeps everything in that row in the same order. It doesn't scramble it.
Yeah, it reorders the whole spreadsheet, and there are some caveats to that. And I want to say, like, if you have certain cells highlighted and then you do it, it can sometimes scramble your data, but usually when it does, like, you'll notice immediately something's wrong. So I usually try to just making sure like nothing's highlighted. I don't know, is there another Excel guru that knows when it does that?
I just know that that's the quickest way to completely ruin your data set.
Well, everything has to be filtered. I noticed that she doesn't have A, Y, B, A, B, 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 C filtered. So those are not going to sort. So usually if you want to be really safe before you sort anything, I turn off the filter and turn it back on so that it grabs any new data.
That's a great
point.
The
hide and unhide?
And I think, so yeah, so here I just turn the filters off and then turn it back on. But yeah, it's interesting that it's not choosing the filter.
There must be an empty column. That AZ must be empty. So it's not including.
That's a good point. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, everything needs to be continuous. It needs to see that whole block as a single data set or a conglomerate of data.
Yeah.
What I do to make sure that I get everything correct is I highlight the entire worksheet by going over to the top left.
Okay, like this.
Highlight it, then you go to data or sort. Yeah, data, then sort. Now, whatever you do, it will.
Yeah, now it's forcing it to put a drop down on every single. Yeah, that's maybe a good call out to just be safe.
That's sort of my point, Dan, is that I was able to do it using this drop down, and it somehow overrides that. Like it doesn't need, you don't need to select the entire set of data, or do you?
Well, I think
once, sure, I always do.
Yeah, I think once you confirm you've got, once you confirm these drop down arrows everywhere, then you can trust that no matter which field you're sorting on, it's going to do the whole spreadsheet. But yeah, I think the idea was, say I turned this off and I only turned filtering on for these rows when I sort on these, which I'm not going to do. Only going to sort those, and then it will scramble the alignment with everything else. So that's what you have to be careful of.
And you're toast at that point.
Yeah, so that's probably the best, safest answer. I think, Dan, you're right, is when you turn your filters on, highlight the whole dang spreadsheet, then turn filters on, and then you'll get the drop down arrows in every single column for sure. And then because I think I might have just messed it up as I turn it on and off and was lost my filters for those guys. So I probably just messed up my columns, and that happens now and then you got to fix it, or revert to your saved copy.
Michelle, this is Jan Turner. I've got a question on the conditional formatting to highlight. You said that you do the top 25% and the bottom 25 of your data.
Mhm.
I do the same thing, but I actually plug in from the percentile reports.
Mhm.
But every 2 weeks when as soon as they update those percentile reports, then I have to go back and redo all my conditional formatting. My question is there a way that I could make a tab and download the percentile report that somehow the conditional formatting will go look at that to get its new criteria?
Yeah, I think you could just do VLOOKUP for that. Tell it to go look for, whatever you, well, let's see. Let me think about, yeah, I'm sure there's a way. But yeah, in your conditional formatting, that might be kind of tricky.
Yeah, that way, because I want I want to do my color coding according to the percentile report.
Yeah, I wonder, that's the thing though, is I don't know how you would get this number to look up from somewhere else.
Use formula to determine cell formats.
Oh,
So you could
yes.
probably do something there.
Okay.
Oh my gosh,
I
Lisa,
could now you've given me a challenge. Now I'm going to have to figure this out.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, I bet there's a way. Here's what I do to just keep an eye on that, because again, like I'm usually just looking at the 60th percentile, and I do copy it in, not every time, but now and then I just go get those numbers and I put them here and I kind of mark them in a purple row so that it's easy for me to see. And then I also do it with my medians. When I redo a data run, I just let Excel calculate my medians. So I will first sort to get these numbers at the bottom so that all my sheep data is at the top, and then you can just go equals median, and Excel helps you. So then I would say, let's see what column I'm in, Z. I'd want to go starting from Z2 through Z158. And then that gives me the median value, and you can click and drag that all the way across. Oops, I wanted to do one more cell. And then I would just copy and paste. And if you go copy, now this is highlighted, and then I actually want to put it in this row, and then I go under here and go paste values. And what that'll do is copy those values over, but get rid of the calculation underneath. So it'll get rid of the equals median and just put the raw value in there. And what I like about that is just when I'm kind of sorting and perusing through this and arguing with myself about admitting I really need to get rid of some view that's my favorite, is I, then I can just kind of see, all right, here's my top animals, here's my median value, and here's the NSIP 60th percentile. And then how far below both those things is this U that I'm thinking about, or above, or whatever. So it's just kind of, that moving baseline of helping you see what's in the middle. And I should probably call out, does everybody remember the difference between median and average or mean? So average is when you add up all the numbers in the data set and divide by the number of items in the data set, and that gives you your average, where the median is taking all the numbers and picking the middle value. And so I think maybe I have an interesting example of that, of number of lambs born, where my median is way up here, it's 17%. And it's just because I have so many of these values of kind of, middle teens. And so even though the whole data set, is this long, the median is way higher than the average, if that makes sense. So you can choose to represent it either way, but just need to make sure you're mindful of which thing you're using. All right, you guys, well, we're 55 minutes into the hour. Any other questions, discussion points? Dan, what other stuff do you do? Oh, go ahead, John.
I just had a quick question. Do you do anything as far as weighting, as far as longevity? I know that we've talked about this, it's something that we probably need, but I've started to be more lenient with some of my older ewes that are, they're still chugging out lambs and they're getting older. Their numbers are drifting, start to drift down at a certain point compared to the ewe lambs, but the ewe lambs haven't proven themselves. Have you stumbled into anything just playing with the numbers, or have you had anything as far as those older ewes to am I making sense? Kind of
Yeah,
thinking through
totally.
that.
I know. And I think I struggle with that too. I mean, I don't have a concrete way of evaluating it, but it's always in the back of my mind. I think sometimes I'll sort, that's part of why I have birth year in here is sometimes maybe I just want to look at like, let me just look at those older ewes and kind of understand the context of which ones are still, performing pretty well versus, yeah, here's one that's, starting to kind of slump. She's really old, 2012, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, because you want to keep those longevity genes around and ideally be keeping some daughters out of her because obviously she's a long-lived lady. But yeah, you're right that if you're only hardcore looking at her numbers, she might fall out of the system since her growth is dipping down quite a bit. So yeah, I struggle with that too. And sometimes I kind of think, there's that age bracket where, well, I could still sell her as a discount to somebody who's just getting started, who wants, just a few more lamb crops out of her and she'll be coddled in some, homesteady environment. So maybe I should sell her before it's, she's too old and nobody wants her. And then I'm going to just hamburger her eventually. So I do struggle with that sometimes where I don't like to keep them around unless they are pretty high scoring and pretty productive. But yeah, it's a tough thing. And we don't have a good measure for longevity. I don't know. What do you do? Just keep it in the back of your mind when you're doing selection to try to make sure you're rewarding those ewes that are still around and plugging out lambs.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of try to. So one of the rams that I keep out of my own stuff to turn back.
Oh yeah,
I definitely like to use rams that are out of use that have been around a long time.
Yeah,
because you can. I mean, this is a trap that the dairy industry fell into really hard. Was that that they were looking at the numbers for early lactation and for the first couple of years on lactation and then they were really goosing them and boy everything was clicking and the selections were making it great, but then pretty quick they were running out of cows that could make it to 3 or 4 lactations. They could just really only handle 2. Numbers still look good on paper, but they just couldn't make it. And, that's something that I've kind of noticed, you look at my ewe lambs compared to the ewes and you're always like, holy cow, I ought to just sell all the old ewes and just keep all my ewe lambs, but it's not a profitable decision to do that. I mean, there's other reasons not to do that, but, so I try to just I'm kind of like, well, what did she produce? I try to look at an older ewe, she's older, and what did she produce? Did she produce a lamb that was higher? Then I'll probably keep her. I'm a little more likely to do it. And I don't know exactly a good way to do it, but it makes me nervous sometimes because I don't know.
Yeah, it's a struggle. I know. And I do worry. I'm kind of glad when they got rid of those sort of ranked percentile reports where, because I felt like it was encouraging competitiveness and everybody to be the winner, to be the top scorer, because then how you can kind of manipulate it is to always breed lamb to lamb, lamb to lamb. So you're always, leapfrogging those scores every year, but those are low accuracy scores, right? Because you're always using this year's ram in a bunch of young animals that may not, don't have a lot of accuracy. So you can get too obsessed with chasing the numbers and trying to combine the best of the best to get your numbers higher and higher and higher, but it's probably a false sense of improvement or growth. And then you're leaving behind your reliable old ladies that have solid data behind them to really be sure in their EBVs.
Yeah, one non-numbered thing I've tried to do is when I go looking for a ram, I'll try to pick if I look at it, I'm like, well, how old is the dam? And if she's a ewe lamb, I'm always kind of like, as compared, at least, if I'm down between 2 rams and this ewe's 6-7 years old and this ewe's a ewe lamb, I'm like, wow, probably want that one out of that 6-7 year old ewe rather than the ewe lamb. But
yeah, I think so too. I think I take that into consideration as well, that you have more confidence in those numbers versus that ram lamb maybe as good as the numbers say, but it's a little bit more of a gamble because the accuracies aren't there.
Have either of you ever done anything with the actual dollars a ewe produced per year, like the gross income from a ewe? You ever taken it that far?
I haven't. Has anybody else?
I do it every year.
Do
It's,
you?
yeah, at tax time. By the time I get to tax time and I know all my expenses, and then I have like a list of the $1,000 ewes that produce $1,000 worth of lambs a year. And then, because there's ewes that don't, but they're still good. And then there's ones that blow your mind. And then there's ones that, 2 years in a row, she had twins, but one of them died. And then they really stand out when you start looking at the amount of money they brought to the table. And then you know what your farm expenses are. So I only have one enterprise, sheep. So all my expenses have to be balanced on the backs of those ewes. So I calculate every year, how much did I have to earn per ewe to float the farm? And, what's that break even point per ewe? And yeah, boy, it really points out which ones, if they do that a couple years in a row, they got to go.
Yeah, interesting. And then is it aggregate? So like, if she loses $50 this year and then next year she only makes $20, like now you've got this aggregate running total of what her contribution has been.
After all that, I don't get that fancy with it. I just sort of like to see how many years in a row you made the $1,000 list.
Yeah.
Years in a row did you not make the break-even list?
Yeah.
Those are two numbers that matter to me. How much? So the $1,000 is an artificial number, but it's a pretty good number. And then the break-even list, however many hundreds of dollars that is for per ewe, for the farm to break even. I want to see obviously I want to see everybody above that, but some years you don't, because you had a perfectly good ewe lost a lamb due to drop the bail on it,
Yeah.
and bail on the lamb, and she only raised a single. But you follow me? So I'm just curious if your longevity question, John, has you can't, when you have those really long-lived ewes, you can really get super data like that as to how much they've earned lifetime. And that's I don't know if anybody takes those numbers that far, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's cool. That definitely seems like a good, direct dollar metric, as well as, that probably makes you ponder too, just the replacement cost of starting over with a ewe lamb, and, she's not going to be as productive that first year. Ladies.
That sounds like I might have to look into that a little bit, because, historically it's been a while, but I've had ewes that produce rams with horns on a regular basis. And they're not, their EBVs are, outstanding, but they're not very marketable. So, they're all going to kill. So I think that's an interesting idea. That's a metric I may have to explore.
Yeah, I definitely feel there's a correlation there that, I'll get like maybe 1 or 2 rams a year that are just fully horned, not even skirt, but like full on horns. And almost invariably they will have the top EBVs. And so I usually do market them with disclosure and at a discount, and someone will always grab them in my market. Be like, heck yeah, I want those meat genes. But yeah, I do think there's got to be some genetic correlation there to where it's masculinity or some gene set that they are always super growers in their EBVs. It's really interesting. Oh, Sandra said FarmWorks has that ewe valuation calculation. Yeah, and I think Ranch Manager also has some stuff in there. I've never played with all those fields of like keeping track of, how much you sold lambs for and pounds of lamb, and I think it will help you with some of those calculations.
The other thing,
calculating a schedule, if you're doing a Schedule F for taxes, I have to present my accountant with all the, all my expenses and all my income, and it's all right in front of me. There's a 10-day period when I have to go through every single number, and I go to Excel and I manage everything in Excel and I send them the big summary. So that's how I get at it.
Yeah, that's a great metric. All right, you guys, well, I could talk about this all night, so I'm happy to stay as long as you like, but any other last minute questions, or feel free to drop off if you got other stuff to do this evening.
Yeah, I just thought I would add that, the index is currently in limbo, but it is looking at being reconstructed. Part of the reconstruction could be longevity. We don't know what all is going to go into it. It's going to be a bioeconomic index that is going to, whenever it comes back.
Oh,
So-
really? So he's gonna not just update the parameters, but actually reevaluate what goes into it?
Yeah, we're
Oh, interesting.
actually talking about hiring consultants.
That might be
It won't be longevity yet. We're working on longevity, but we got a long way to go on that one. So we did get some grant funds, and so the ARS locations are looking at what longevity means. So reasons for culling and that sort of thing.
I got a question. Will you be measuring on temperament?
We don't have a good measurement for that. But we are measuring like maternal ability. So it's kind of an easy thing. Does you leave with both of her lambs? One gets left behind, one's DOA, you know, that sort of thing. So there's a score.
Yeah.
Do you do
Okay.
an objective measure of that? And what's coming up in Dr. Ron's next study, Joan? Is he gonna try to look at mastitis or some kind of udder health and conformation? I can't remember what else he mentioned that they were thinking about.
We are doing udder health. So feet fell out of it. We were going to include feet. I think our flock probably has the best data for that with the US mark flock, because they're using foot back, so they're not getting a whole lot of feet data. But yeah, udder, there's a whole bunch of udder data that we're collecting.
No,
And
but yeah.
And then we have to figure out, okay, we're collecting it, but what's going to be easy for the producers to collect? So there's kind of different stages that we'll go through.
And reasonably objective.
Yep.
Hard to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So the udder scores right now they're pretty difficult to follow, but I mean, some of it's kind of easy, but you know, like which way do the teats, you know, are they facing out in? Anything that's not normal, and then like the shape of the udder and that sort of thing. Then we're doing mastitis, using those California mastitis tests to indicate whether a ewe has mastitis or not.
Yeah, that'll be exciting
Yeah.
data to have eventually.
Yeah, and somebody wanted to include coat color, so we may do that as well. I'm a little, I mean, based on what you said, it might be kind of important. It's funny because we like to keep all the white animals. So.
Yeah, and some people's market is more prioritized there, right? Where people want that uniform, they all look the same and they're all white. And then, yeah, like I'm way more in the homesteader, you know, where everybody wants cute animals in their pasture and they're just producing lamb for their freezer. So they don't really care that much about growth. You know, or the other factors, like they just want cool looking animals. So yeah, it's a big market for me for sure.
We also had a question about the information. I think it was kind of a question about the NSIP
Oh
website.
yeah, I'll just jump there.
And
Yeah.
just want to make sure that everyone knows this is not a secret website. It is available to the public, and we would like to encourage the use of it and you know, have people explore as much of it as they can.
Yeah, so here I'll just drag my window so you can see it better. It's just nsip.org is the main site, and then under here under find stock with EBVs is that searchable database. And there's other good, you know, articles up here, some resources and stuff if you're still trying to learn about NSIP. Yeah, it's all publicly accessible now.
One thing,
And someone asked about EBVs. If you could click on the resources and show the EBV definitions.
Yeah, so under here, yeah, there's lots of articles in here. You want anyone in particular? Is this the good one? Is this from Dr. Notter's original? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, this is a great, in a nutshell, explanation of all the traits and what they are, and the wool traits are in here too, in case you have a wool breed.
And some of those formulas to get those apparently are changing or have.
Oh yeah, he's gonna have to update all this.
We don't have
Huh?
the updated ones yet.
Endless updating is going to be required now. Find all the places it's mentioned. But
Is there,
there.
sorry,
Go ahead, John.
I did so the other day I went to bring one up and I saw that the hair wasn't available, the hair index. And so I did a little searching and I didn't find it. And I have to admit, I didn't do as good at Googling as I could have done. But is there a good spot where they have it started making me look at the SRC dollars, the land plan index. Is there a good definition of that out there somewhere? That's exactly what that is.
Self-replacing carcass, isn't that one? It accounts for loin depth and fat too, right? So if those data points are missing, then it's just a variant of growth. Is that right?
Is that what that is?
Remember, I don't think it's in this. No, John, do you remember what's in that SRC?
Yeah, I believe it's it has it has some of the carcass measurements, and is there not a measure of parasite resistance in that too? Perhaps not. I know it includes carcass measurements, but there's so few people taking those measurements that it gets a little flaky.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite the same thing as this Carcass Plus from the old system, but I wanted to say it was similar flavor where it's just taking some multipliers of the weight data and the eye muscle and fat. So if you don't have those, then this algorithm of weight, post-weaning weight, so it doesn't tell you what you know. Somebody mute, who is that? Yeah, I know.
Thanks. That makes sense.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I'm flying a little bit blind too without the index to sort on, because I'm still really reliant on that. I mean, we've had, so many discussions over the years of could it be improved? Should we make a grass index? But I do find it's a really great first course sort to just say, just give me kind of the top animals with the index. And from there, I can start to scan to see ones that, are top across the board or ones that have some low points. So it is a great place to start when you've got, more than 50 animals you're trying to compare to, I guess.
It's especially good to understand how an animal gets a high index, because you can arrive at it a number of different ways, and not a max index of 18 or 120. That's pretty hard to achieve no matter what you do. But you can get to a 110, 111, a number of different paths. So focusing on high number born versus moderate number born, high number weaned, moderate number, sort of a moderate to high number weaned, but an exceptionally high maternal weaning weight. There's any number of those things are all, drivers of that model. So knowing that article you had from the website or from the NSIP website is, has the weightings of them, so you can see how
they're actually
important number of lambs weaned is relative to weaning weight. Weaning weight is very influence.
Yeah, so here's the actual, it's just simple algebra that goes into it. So the hair index is weaning weight times 0.246, maternal weaning weight, which is milk, times 2.226, and then minus 3.5 number of lambs born, and then plus 40.6. And this is times the
40.6.
Yeah, it's times the percentage, right? So this blew me away at first, but I think it's 0.406 if you're expressing the EBV in like
decimal
decimal.
Yep.
But yeah, still it's really skewing for this number of lambs weaned. And then the reason it's minus number of lambs born is we want to penalize ewes that have lots of lambs but then don't raise them all or they're not weaned. So there's kind of a negative correlation there. But yeah, I was just highlighting, like, here's a ewe that's, that exactly, right? Like she's got a pretty high index, and it's because her maternal weaning weight and her number of lambs weaned is high. So it's really pushing her up there, but then she's really quite weak on number of lambs born and growth. So sometimes that index can get a little bit skewed, and that's why you do need to dig into the underlying data to decide, is she really that good, or does she have some weak points? All right, you guys, any last comments or questions? Oh, there's a few more. What's Andrew say? So are any of the producers with registered animals in their flock updating pedigree master to include the KHSI registration number in the animals? I don't think anybody has been doing that, Sandra. I mean, you'd certainly be free to, I think there's extra data fields in pedigree master where you could stick that data, but I don't know if there's a standard convention that many people.
Yes, there is a place where you can put it.
Okay, are many people using that at all, or? And then it's not like in the searchable database, right? So it wouldn't be usable to many.
No, it is in the searchable database. You
Is it?
can search by registration number.
Oh. Is that new? I'm gonna go back.
Registration number is a valid field in pedigree master. So if you have you have to go up to the search bar, the NSIP search, and type in the registration number of the animal.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can search there, but it's not like in this data set, and does it come out in the results window, or it's just like only if you want to search for a particular animal you could find it?
If you want to search for a particular animal.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and I think most people are using a convention where they match, right? Like, I think the generally agreed upon convention was, say, this animal, I would number 200098. So it's taking 1 or 2 digits from the birth year at the beginning and then the last 3 digits. But I know not everybody's doing that. So you can't always count on being able to leapfrog between the two.
And by the way, ATN Richards is doing a lot of, super database projects, and he just got permission from the board to be able to search the registration numbers as well. So he's going to be working on some coordination between NSIP and KHSI registration. So I think that we're going to see an easier tool now to make sure that we're talking about the same animals. Does that make sense?
Nice. Yeah, I was going to go to that actual field to show you where it is too. Is it where under miscellaneous?
So on the registration number, is that something that's automatically uploaded in the search, or does someone have to put that in pedigree master?
The producer has to put it in there.
So it's right here, right under the miscellaneous tab, so you have to enter it.
Yes.
I kind of go the other way. I'd love to have their NSIP number become their registration number, but
By registration number, are we talking the KHSI registration number? Or are we talking the?
Yes, the KHSI registration number.
I would have to.
I would like that too.
I would have to look that up on every single animal if I were to search on that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that number, like I'd never use it in my entire life.
Never, ever. Never, ever.
It's on the form. It's a database tag that identifies that animal to the registry. But
yeah, one of the problems is you could have one animal that could be in NSIP twice or something like that. So we want to make sure that that animal is identifiable, and exactly known as to who it is.
And sometimes I think people would purchase an animal that they knew was NSIP, but they didn't know the NSIP ID. So this allowed them a way for us to pair the two together.
Yeah.
Now we can actually add the NSIP ID number on the registration. So that is a win.
yeah, so at least that's trackable there, where you gotta just ask the breeder for that data. I was going to show you a quick way if you wanted to do that and wanted to bulk upload. I mean, this is probably a subject for a whole nother hour-long webinar, but you can bulk upload data into Pedigree Master if you don't want to, open up each one of these tabs and hand type it for each animal. And here's what my spreadsheet looks like for just bulk uploading all of my weight data. So you just have to be careful to name the columns correctly for what Pedigree Master is expecting to see. But then as you go along and you capture your reading weights, you can, capture the dates and the group that they're in, and then all of this just bulk uploads into Pedigree Master, so you don't have to hand type it all. And you can do that with any field in there. So it's kind of a handy little thing. All right, you guys. Well, should we wrap it up there? Are there more questions? Look in the chat window. That was all just my
Thanks so much, Michelle.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope it was helpful. Feel free to shoot me an email or text or whatever if you have questions later. Or, I'm happy to jump on another Zoom call if somebody wanted to walk through this more in their own spreadsheet.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And Michelle has volunteered to do a follow-up like in another month or two. So, if you have any questions or ideas in between now and then, please let her know.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. All right, thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
All right.